So I'm here with Sue. We're going to do a Q&A about yoga for rider fitness. So I'm going to let Sue talk about what she is trained in and what yoga means to her a little bit, and then I'll ask her some questions about how we can relate the yoga back to rider fitness, because in my experience a lot of the yoga that you see for riders is all about hip flexibility. It's all about the postures, the movements, the asanas, and how you can become more flexible for riding and that sort of thing. But I believe that there is more to yoga that we can incorporate into our rider fitness journeys, which I'm not an expert in, but Sue is. So I am going to let her introduce herself, her background with yoga, and then we'll get into some specific questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Namaste. I'm Sue Johnson, and I have been trained in Patanjali's Eightfold Yoga, which you will probably know more of as Hatha Yoga. As in, when you go to a Hatha Yoga class, which is good, you will more than likely work on the asanas, the postures and the poses. And that too is good, because doing the postures and poses is one small part of yoga, but what it does is, in moving the body in the certain methods and techniques, is releasing energies that are blocked in the body. And yoga is all about slowing down the energy that we use and using it and channeling it in the right way. And there's many different names for this. But when I'm taught or I'm teaching this, the very first thing that I would like to do is to teach a very simple breath awareness. So if you did nothing else in yoga, but you did the breath and learned how to use different methods of breathing and when it's appropriate to use them and what is suitable for your own individual yoga, then it will have a profound effect on all parts of the body. But also, if you can incorporate, if it's something that you enjoy, you can incorporate all of the different structures of Hatha Yoga, of which there are 8, but it would take a much longer video to go through all of that. But I'm happy to have questions and answers from Jenny to what those are. So Jen.
Okay, so I know that, for those of you that follow my workouts and follow me and my training method, you'll know that I'm a bit gung-ho, and that I like to work out fast and dirty, and I like to get things done quick, and I like to move pretty heavy, and yoga isn't something that I'm particularly, I don't incorporate into my daily life, but I certainly do believe in it. And the first experience I really had of yoga in terms of the breath work was actually not related to horse riding, it was related to childbirth. And actually I always thought breath work was a little bit
Nonsense.
a bit of nonsense, but actually when I remember talking to my mum and talking about breath work, and if you can, do 12 deep inhalations and exhalations, that will be a contraction over. And I didn't really pay any attention to it until it got to time for contractions and time for the child to be born, and I thought, I'm going to have to do something because I can't concentrate on what I need to do, and actually really use those 12 breaths, 12 long inhalations and exhalations, and it actually got me through every single contraction. And although we're talking about childbirth and not rider fitness here, where I'm trying to play this around is that it really gave me the focus and the concentration, because I started to panic and I started to lose my mind a little bit, and I started to think that I couldn't do it. And then my husband said, remember what your mum said about the breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. And just being reminded to breathe in and breathe out got me to concentrate on what I needed to do, which was get the baby out. And relating to your rider fitness journey, for those of you that follow my work, I did a lot of research with riders in the field and in competition. And the most common thing that I would see with these riders is that they just couldn't focus, particularly event riders in the dressage phase. They would once they got to the show jump phase and the cross country phase, which is what they like to do, they're jumping, they were fine. But when it came to the dressage phase, they got very anxious, very nervous. You could see them in the warm up, they couldn't control their breathing, their heart rate was higher than normal because they weren't concentrating on what they needed to do. And I felt that this is somewhere that a little bit of more mindful concentration and focus work might actually help them in their rider fitness journey. So is there anything you can do when you're anxious or nervous, either before you get on the horse or whilst you're on your horse, that you can do to sort of use the breath work to focus and concentrate yourself so that you can potentially perform a better test?
Yeah, there's loads, but first of all you need to know how they affect you, because you're very individual, so what works for me might actually really irritate you. I've worked with many different people, and I know from myself that even though I teach certain techniques, they might not necessarily work for me, but they will work for another person. So we want to learn about yourself, so this is about knowing yourself, and if it irritates you, don't do it, because it's going to wind you up even more so. So way before you get to the competitions that you're going into, and I can relate to this because in my day when I was doing dressage, my mind was just so busy I couldn't focus on what I was doing, and my horse went in all skittish because the vibes just resonated right the way through the horse. So beforehand, finding out what breath is good for me. And there's something called a bee breath that we do in yoga, which would be the worst thing to do on a horse, and it would be the worst thing to do if you're somebody who it affects and makes more angry. Now, I relate to when I was bringing my children up, I would get very mad and I would count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'd be even madder by the time I got to 10. But I learned that the yoga breathing and what I was talking about with an abdominal breath and just noticing where the breath goes, if I did 3 breaths, either with my hand on my abdomen, or if I was sitting on my horse with my hands on the rein and I could feel up through the arms my breath and how that was affected, I would just take the time to notice what my breath was doing. By the time I'd done 3 breaths, or by the time I'd be standing about to tell the children off, I had calmed down, and then I was able to focus on what I was doing. So you could do this before a competition, finding out does that work for you. And there are other methods. Maybe the one I was talking about, the bee breath, would work for you, and you could take yourself off and go off to somewhere it's quieter and do that. But you'd find out beforehand. So there are lots of breaths that we can work on.
So what's the bee breath?
Bee breath. Bee breath is great. It sounds like a bee, and that's what the sound you hear in your head. But of course, if you do that in front of people, you might be a bit nervous about doing it because you're going to make this sound out and they're going to wonder what you're doing. So that's why it's probably best to go and do that quietly, and also to find out whether it works for you. So I'm quite happily do it because I do use this. So you inhale through both nostrils, inhale, and then what you're going to do is the breath is going to come out through your mouth, and you're going to purse the lips together and go. It looks very silly, but the longer the breath comes out and the way it resonates through, you actually sound like a bee, and it calms. The breath is coming out for as long as possible before you enjoy the next breath in. So a nice inhalation through both nostrils. You get to the point where you're holding your breath, but you're holding it full, and then purse your lips together and allow the breath to come all the way out for as long as possible. And you might feel that you're going whoop, 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 whoop. So you just keep doing that breath, and because the exhalation is much longer, you're not going to start feeling dizzy. You're actually going to enjoy that breath in and now as you're exhaling, you're drawing the belly button back, the breath is coming out, and then you enjoy the breath in. The abdomen comes out, the diaphragm flattens down. And even now, I feel even more calmer just talking to you, just through doing that. Now, I know that works for me, but it might irritate you in some way. I don't want to sow the seed of doubt, but I'd say go away and try that. Try it in front of people, try it away from people, see whether you can do that. When you feel comfortable with that breath, you're withdrawing yourself in, and I often shut my eyes. I've been doing it all the time now, but I shut my eyes and I can hear the breath. And I know that when I'm really nervous, it will be whoop, 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 and I sound like a powerboat trying to start up or something. And as I keep doing it, then I feel I can hear a hummingbird or a bee, and it's known as bee breath in yoga. And it just calms down, and then you feel focused, it clears the mind, and you're ready to take on any challenge. So,
okay.
That's the big
So
thing.
when you typically think about yoga for rider fitness, you think about, you know, that like typically you think of it as more of an asana based, posture based, like hip opener. You see a lot of hip openers, a lot of like lower back releases, because a lot of riders will have quite a lot of lower back pain from it's like sort of concussive movements of riding a horse, repetitive movements. And we see a lot of riders that are one-sided, so they can do postures better on one side than another. So if I was one of my members and they wanted to start yoga, what should they do? Because I know for me, when I do yoga, I don't really feel it's actually yoga. I feel like I'm just doing mobility. I know they're yoga poses, but it's more of a mobility session than it is yoga. So we take some of the asanas and fit it into. I know with the yoga that I have on my site, it's more of some of the postures adapted into a mobility session rather than the practice of yoga itself. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, with yoga, what we believe is that when you're doing the asanas, you're releasing energy, and for every knot or twist or whatever you want to call it, a block in the energy, and you'll feel it as you move through and how you move your body. If there is a release there, but for every release there is in the body, there is a release in the mind, and that's what yoga is supposed to be, a union between the mind and the body, and in fact it is all one system. So asanas are good, and even if you go to a class and you practice the asana and the yoga teacher doesn't do the breath awareness beforehand, she doesn't do a counter pose, or she doesn't explain, the asanas are still good. I'm never going to knock those. Hatha yoga is about, for this in this day and age, it's about balancing, and everything has to be in balance. If something is slightly, you'll go up and down, but you need to always be trying to rebalance one way or the other. And that's about focusing and being strong. It isn't about, collapsing down. Is a great strength in it. So it's empowering. The breath work is the very first thing that I would teach to people. And then I would bring them onto the asanas, and then it sounds as though I was contradicting myself, and I would say, don't worry about the breath work, let's get the right alignment in the asana. I'll tell you what effect it is having on the body, why we are doing it, down to, are you right or left-handed? That makes a big difference, because you're going to be more powerful, the stronger hand. So we would reverse it around so that we can then start rebalancing the other side. And you just build up on it. It's important. If Jenni would be happy, we start a foundation and we build up on it, and then you can work within your own ability, because yoga is very unique. It's not a competition, it is for yourself, and it is to draw on the energy and not waste any of the energy, and use it where you need it, because you're going to need to have to react quickly at times, and it's certainly not about hugging trees and any of that weird stuff. Really isn't.
So if some of these members, they've been doing my VidFit workouts, and now they see, a bit of yoga, maybe she's going to do a bit of yoga. Does the yoga replace the rider fitness workouts that we're doing?
No, absolutely not. One thing that really does grate on me a little bit, but because of my yoga practice, it's not for me to go out there and change other people. Yoga is about changing yourself. Yeah? So you have a choice, something to about it. I often hear, when I go into a gym, I often hear people say, oh, I'm not going to go to my workout class tonight, whatever it is, or I'm not going to go to the gym tonight because I've done my yoga. And I think, oh, why? I would love to say to you, actually, yoga, it does not replace your exercise classes. One of the side benefits of yoga is that you will become more aware, you'll become more flexible, but it is actually about calming the mind, yeah? And when the body feels good and can move, the mind can be quiet, and that's why we say about move your body to calm your mind, move your body to still the mind. And when the mind is still, we can focus and we can do things so much.
Okay guys, I'm afraid my video ran out there, but my mum has taken a flight from Vancouver Island back over to Worcester in the UK, and while she was over here in Canada, we decided to do this collaborative video about yoga, because my mum is a trained holistic yoga practitioner as well as a holistic massage therapist based in Worcester, and I would like to bring her expertise on board a little bit with some yoga practice, yoga breathing, and perhaps some like a more yoga side of things to the Event Fit site. So this was sort of like our opener to see what you guys were interested in. And I just wanted to ask her some basic questions that I come across all the time about yoga, just so that we had something to sort of converse about on video. And if there's anything in particular that you guys would like to see in the future, whether that be like, you know, like a breathing practice before competition that you can download and play before you get on your horse, or whether you would like, you know, like a yoga flow to practice, or whether you'd like a program, like a phased program from like beginner, intermediate and advanced. That's definitely something that we can start working on in the future for you guys, because like I said, my workouts tend to be quite fast and dirty, and although I believe that's very good for you, it would be really good to connect the mind with your body, which is something that I think we can work on with not only with ourselves and our busy lives, because a lot of you come to me saying that you're very busy, so we can work together, connecting the mind and the body and creating balance, not both in our life but both in our exercise plan as well. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you found it a bit funny. I thought the bee breath was really funny, and I thought my reaction to that was quite amusing. I enjoyed watching it back. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please do comment and interact with me below. I'd love to hear what you think, and I look forward to making the next video for you soon.